Okay, so this is the bonus episode. If you're watching this, it's because you've given me $1 or you pirated the episode. If you pirated the episode, that's fine. Just consider giving me $1 when you're able to. Sorry this is a bit late. I had a bit of a major depressive episode last week and just launched into self-destructive behaviors instead of working on the video. But I knocked out about 5 or 6 reasons I was hating myself this week, so I hope we're going to be back on a smooth schedule pretty soon. So, by popular demand, we're going to be talking about the KILLDOZER. So they say never meet your heroes. This episode will be no exception. So first, let's take a look at the most popular account posted by a Facebook user on June 4th, 2017, now with 113,000 shares and 95,000 likes. It reads, "Today is a very special day. June 4th, 2017 marks the 13th anniversary of the KILLDOZER's rampage through Granby, Colorado. Sit down, kids, and let me tell you a tale about a reasonable man driven to do unreasonable things." Marvin Heemeyer was a man who owned a muffler shop in Granby, Colorado, which is correct. The city council ordained to approve the construction of a concrete factory on the lot across from Marvin's shop, which is correct-ish. In the process, this blocked the only access road to the muffler shop, which is not correct. Marvin petitioned to stop the construction to no avail, which is correct-ish. He petitioned to construct a new access road and even bought the heavy machinery to do so himself, which is incorrect. A concrete plant never blocked a road. He was denied, which is also incorrect because he never did the petition. The concrete factory went up in disregard to the ramifications on Marvin's business, which is sort of right and sort of wrong. To add insult to injury, the factory construction disconnected the muffler shop from the city's sewage lines, which is very incorrect and is actually going to be the primary subject of this video. An indifferent city government then chose to fine Marvin for this, which is correct, but for the wrong reasons. His business and livelihood were in ruin, which is not correct. Rather than lie down and die, Marvin chose to fight back. Over the course of 1.5 years, Marvin secretly outfitted the bulldozer he bought to save his business with 3-foot-thick steel and concrete armor, camera systems guarded with bulletproof glass, which is partially wrong. The armor was only 5 inches thick. On June 4th, 2014, Marvin Heemeyer lowered the armored shell over the top of himself, entombing him inside the KILLDOZER to make his last stand, which is incorrect. The KILLDOZER actually had a hatch to get in and out. He burst forth from the walls of his muffler shop and straight into the concrete factory that ruined his business. Over the course of the next several hours, Marvin drove his KILLDOZER through 13 buildings owned by those officials that had wronged him, including the city council building itself. This is correct. SWAT teams swarmed the dozer, but it proved immune to small arms fire and even explosives. Another piece of heavy machinery was even brought out to fight the KILLDOZER, but it too fell to the dozer's righteous fury. This is correct. In the end, Marvin's KILLDOZER became trapped in one of the buildings it was built to destroy. Marvin chose to take his life, the only life he took that day, which is correct. Today we celebrate KILLDOZER Day and Marvin Heemeyer, the last great American folk hero, a man driven to the brink who chose to fight back against an indifferent system. From the notes he left behind after his passing, I was always willing to be reasonable until I had to be unreasonable. Sometimes reasonable men must do unreasonable things. Happy motherfucking KILLDOZER Day, everyone. Okay, so this is the account generally accepted by the public and has a huge number of obvious inaccuracies and flat-out fictions we can see just from looking at a map, or a city skylines diorama, for instance, so that's what we're going to do. Now, the bulk of my research comes from the relatively new book, KILLDOZER, The True Story of the Colorado Bulldozer Rampage, written by Patrick Brower, a reporter from the local newspaper in Granby, who had interacted with Marvin Heemeyer multiple times before KILLDOZER Day and who wound up on Marvin's little list of targets for perceived slights in reporting. And there's a little more editorializing on Marvin's emotional state and thought process than I'd have written in the book, but overall it's a pretty good book. It's about 300 pages, some good pictures, the text is pretty big, some good background on Marvin the man and on the town. I am not sponsored by this book or by the author. Anyway, Granby, Colorado is a town about 53 miles west-northwest of Denver. It has 6 numbered streets, a main street which is also U.S. Route 40, a lot of auto-oriented businesses with a few vestigial pedestrian-oriented businesses, a train station that sees a single California Zephyr each way, each day, and a few blocks of detached housing north of the main street. Its city hall is here at Jasper Street and 0 Street, so I'll make that 7 numbered streets. Overall, then, fairly typical small town, except I ain't never heard of no 0 Street. So there was this guy, Marvin Heemeyer, who lived in the next town over. He ran a muffler shop in Granby, Colorado, which I've tried to recreate in city skylines here, at least in 2 dimensions. The hills were more than I wanted to deal with. So our guy Marvin, he isn't like the model leftist or anarchist or anything like that. So he knows a trade. He's a welder. He's not in the union, though. He ran his own muffler shop in a building, and that building was on a piece of land that he bought for $42,000 at auction in 1992, outbidding its former owner, Cody Dochev. Dochev had previously run a concrete plant on the property and wanted to get the land back to reopen his old concrete business that he had sold several years prior. So Heemeyer put his muffler shop in the steel building, which is this guy right here, on the former concrete plant land. So to begin this story, we need to talk about poop. Indeed, much of the story is about poop. The property Heemeyer bought was not connected to a sewer line. It also did not have a proper septic tank. So a septic tank is a fairly simple device that allows waste to settle out of liquid, and the clean-ish water that exits out the other end of the tank spreads into a leach field where it can safely self-filter down to the groundwater, right? Heemeyer's new property didn't even have that. He just had a concrete truck barrel buried under the property where the poop went and just stayed there. As an aside, what's a concrete truck barrel doing underground? So the clock is ticking the moment a concrete truck is filled with wet concrete. If it doesn't reach the job site within a certain period of time, that batch of concrete will be rejected and the truck has to go dump its load somewhere else. If it gets stuck in traffic on the way to the dump site or something, the concrete might harden in the barrel and the barrel is then useless. So you take the barrel off the truck and get rid of it. Burying it on the concrete plant site is a fairly common way to dispose of them. This particular one got a second life as a sewage tank. So Marvin decided to do the right thing. He went to the sewer district and asked if he could get a line put into the site. And they said sure. They'd annex the property into the sewer district, but he had to put in 100 feet of line on his own dollar, including a lift station. So, word about that, what that is. Sewers are different from water pipes. They absolutely must run with open channel flow. If you don't know what that is, watch episode 6 of Franklin. I explain it fairly early on in the episode. If a sewer line becomes pressurized, it will clog up very quickly, and pretty soon your toilet will be spewing poop all over your bathroom. So if you need to run sewage uphill, you need a lift station, which typically includes a pit called a wet well, some kind of grinder to grind the poop up, and then a pump to pump the ground up poop to a higher elevation. When the wet well hits a certain poop level, the grinder is fired up to automatically grind up the poop, and the pump is fired up to lift that poop to a higher level. This requires periodic maintenance and a constant electricity supply, and is generally a pain in the ass, but if you gotta pump the poop, there's no other option. So the poop pump and the 100 feet of sewer line were going to cost Marvin about $70,000, which, is a bunch more than he paid for the property to start out with. The sewer district board also suggested he could install a proper septic tank for much less, but Marvin had it with the district since they wouldn't pay for the sewer hookup themselves. And for the record, no sewage district anywhere pays for your individual lot's sewage hookup. You got to do that yourself. His plot was pretty isolated, so it was a little more expensive than it usually is. But this is the case everywhere. You got to pay for your own hookup. But Marvin saw it another way, though. One of the sewage board's members, Ron Thompson, was also vice president of the local excavation company, which was run by Thompson's family. Marvin thought that this was clearly a scam to get a big fat contract for Thompson to dig the trench for his sewer line. And of course, worst of all, the Thompsons were Catholics, unrelated, Chucky R. Law, a group Marvin despised because they read from a different Bible, and because the local Catholic priest had spoken out against Marvin's recent campaign to legalize gambling in Granby. So Marvin left in a huff, saying that the district not paying for his sewer hookup was extortion by government fiat. He never withdrew his annexation request, though, and the board decided to help him out by doing their part and just annexing his property into the sewer district anyway, and the town just sort of ignored the fact that he didn't have a hookup to the sewer line as required by law. So we'll fast forward 5 years to 1997. The Dochev family, from before, had managed to buy back most of the land their old concrete plant was on. That's this building here and the surrounding land, and they wanted to build an indoor concrete batch plant on it. Now, a batch plant is where the water, cement, aggregate, and whatever admixtures or superplasticizers or whatever are shipped in from other factories or concrete facilities and unloaded, mixed, and then loaded into concrete trucks for shipment to a job site, all inside a big shed for the sake of dust control. So it's not like a big rotary cement kiln, which tends to throw off a crap load of dust and has to be outdoors. All the main activities in this place happen inside a shed, and that plan is still there. You can see it on the map. So the town planning commission suggested that the Dochefs see if they could buy Marvin's lot to keep the plant away from the motels and businesses on Route 40. So Joe Dochev, Cody Dochef's son, went to go negotiate with Marvin. Marvin wanted $250,000 for his back lot off a dirt road. Joe left to go see if he could rustle up that amount. So he managed to get that amount, and he came back around 2 days later and said, "We got a deal." Marvin countered by saying he had the property appraised in the past 2 days. Now he wanted $375,000. And Joe said he didn't really know if he could make that. He'd have to really scrounge around for the money, but that he'd be back. 2 months later, Joe returned, saying they'd found an outside investor and could do $350,000. Marvin countered by saying his final offer was $450,000 and gave that one in writing. So this wasn't doable for Joe or the rest of the Dochev family, and Joe knew it. So the Dochefs developed a plan B. They'd buy a defunct subdivision across from their land. Those are these empty lots here. You can still see that the lots are on Google Maps. To make extra room for the plant. Heemeyer attempted to buy the land out from under them, but he was too late. So in response, Heemeyer proposed a land swap where the Dochefs would give him a prime spot closer to the main road in return for Heemeyer's relatively remote muffler shop site. The Dochefs were pretty enthusiastic about this idea. So at their first meeting to negotiate the land swap, Marvin upped the ante again, demanding the Dochefs also build him a new 4,000 square foot building. The two parties agreed to come back to negotiate with formal appraisals and estimates before the first public hearing on the concrete plant. And in the meantime, Marvin got to work at his new role, NIMBY activist. He canvassed the nearby subdivision to build popular opposition to the new plant. He wrote letters to the editor in the local paper decrying what he saw as an illegal rezoning for the new concrete plant. The land had previously been a concrete plant and was zoned accordingly, and whose dust and noise would ruin his business. He ran a muffler repair shop. It's not exactly a quiet or clean environment. He got some other folks in the nearby subdivision to pen similar letters. Public opposition to the project grew quickly. So at the next negotiation meeting, he announced to the Dochefs that their appraisal for the land swap did not satisfy him and that there would be no deal, and he said he would oppose them all the way. At the public hearing, which was almost immediately afterwards, dozens of folks showed up to oppose the plant with Heemeyer. Heemeyer also filed suit against the town to stop the concrete batch plant from being built. So at the first, second, and third public hearings, Heemeyer packed the hall with folks who were against the plant. The Dochefs, in response, improved the concrete plant project. They added extra dust control and noise reduction measures. They added nice landscaping, and the opposition began to waver. Marvin managed to send the approval process all the way back to the start, owing to a technical error in the town's legal procedures, but the Dochefs just went through the approval process a second time, and they went and presented tiny models and descriptions of the plant's environmental features and so on. Finally, the town clerk, Fay Rumsey, penned a letter to the editor revealing what the public had slowly begun realizing. Heemeyer was opposing the project because the Dochefs wouldn't give him his asking price for his property. On January 9th, 2001, Marvin was the only one in the hall opposing the plant at the hearing. The preliminary permits were approved unanimously, leaving only the final approval in April, a formality at that point. That night he realized he was going to lose, and he realized that he'd been screwed over by a corrupt and dishonest town which had committed the terrible crime of allowing a shed to be built across from his auto shop, without even getting the shed owners to purchase his property for an exorbitant amount. So at this point, Marvin recognized that it was all over, and he had to do something to get back at the town. God had ordained him to do so, he thought. So Marvin still had a lawsuit out against the Dochefs project, but the Dochefs agreed to sign a waiver stating that they knew the risks of starting the project while the permits were still the subject of Marvin's lawsuit. They know his lawsuit was unlikely to have merit, so they figured the risks were pretty small to just start and building the plant. And furthermore, Joe Dochef had a plan, which brings us back to poop. So a few years prior, the illegal sewage tank on Marvin's property had filled up, and he found himself up shit creek. Literally. No, more literally than you're thinking even. He wound up pumping the sewage out of the tank with a big gasoline pump directly into the irrigation ditch that ran behind his property. This ditch only ran when it rained, so he could only pump the poop out on certain days. Now, his neighbors, of course, caught on to this pretty quickly and complained. He first attempted to dig an illegal sewer line onto his neighbor's property to hook up to his sewer, which his neighbor discovered pretty quickly, and who told him to get stuffed and fill it back up, which he did. So, hearing complaints from the neighbors, the town realized that earlier they had annexed Marvin's property into the sewer district, and that therefore they could compel him to install a sewer line, which they finally did in July of 2001, 9 years after the property was annexed to the sewer district. Marvin immediately requested and was granted leniency in this decision, so he had a bunch more time to decide what to do. But this made Marvin feel even more put upon, owing to the town's clearly unreasonable demand that he stop dumping his own literal shit in an irrigation ditch, which fed a bunch of the town's lawns and irrigated an entire ranch downstream. So we gotta go back to Joe Dochev's offer from the now under construction concrete batch plant. Joe Dochev's offer was as follows. Should Marvin drop his lawsuit, which he was likely to lose anyway, he would get an easement to hook up to the new concrete plant sewer line for free, and hell, Joe would even build it for him. Marvin just hung up on him. Later, Marvin lost his lawsuit, and therefore his opportunity for a free sewer connection. So there's this myth that Marvin bought the Komatsu bulldozer that was to become the KILLDOZER to build a new access road, since the concrete plant blocked his access road. Now, we can look at the maps and see this is clearly not the case. Here's the shop in 1999, and here's the shop in 2005. Never at any point was his road connection severed. It was always off a dirt road, which never changed locations and was not blocked by the new concrete plant. That's not how right-of-way works. Blocking access to another building or lot on public right-of-way is highly illegal, and any lawyer could get you a huge settlement in seconds if someone else tried to do such a thing. So Marvin didn't need the Komatsu bulldozer for a road. He bought it instead for one reason: to build the KILLDOZER. So, having lost the lawsuit, he told his friends he was done with Granby, getting the hell out of town. He sold his shop and auctioned off most of his equipment. He managed to get $400,000 for the property, 10 times what he paid for it in the first place, and negotiated a lease for part of the building he formerly owned until he finished some work. He also attempted to sell the bulldozer, but when it failed to sell at auction, he saw it as a sign from God that he needed to go on his mission. So Marvin drove the bulldozer into the part of his former muffler shop, now owned by the trash company, and got to work building what he called his MK tank for Marv's Komatsu tank. So this was to become a beast of a machine. Its armor plating was made of 2 plates of 1/2-inch thick steel with 4 inches of concrete between them. A 50 caliber Barrett semi-automatic rifle pointed out the rear. A 30 caliber Herstal semi-auto rifle pointed out the front, and a 223 Ruger Mini 13 pointed out the right side. I hope I got all those right. I don't know a bunch about guns. It had 2 cameras in the front and 2 cameras at the rear, with a 5th one on the right side for the Ruger. Access was provided by a manhole-like hatch that Marvin bolted shut after entering. The rumor that he sealed himself in permanently is a myth that frankly doesn't make sense. One doesn't just lower 25 tons of armament on a bulldozer without performing a few welds on the exterior. Also, the shop wasn't set up to handle a load like that. 3 monitors allowed Marvin to monitor 3 cameras at a time. A small porthole on the right side with 5 sets of plexiglass, plus a closable steel visor for extra visibility, let him operate the Ruger more accurately. The vehicle was equipped with extra cooling, owing to the heavy load placed on the engine. It had a dozer blade for smashing stuff, still fully operational, and a ripper for ripping stuff. It also had air conditioning. So to build it rapidly, he built illegal living quarters in his shed. minus running water or sewage. He pooped in a bucket, which he dumped in the irrigation ditch when it was raining. Old habits die hard. So this is the rampage part. I don't know how to do this in City Skyline, so let me try and find some archival footage. So Marvin had a little list of buildings he was going to go after, from which I quote directly: the concrete plant, something that just says electricity, Main Street, public buildings, the Catholic Church, unrelated, Chucky R. Law, and Mountain Park Electric. And on that same list were about twice as many entries of people, including the Dochefs, who he wrote as douche F, because humor. A second list included only people, some of whom were duplicated from the first list. So his attack on Granby lasted 2 hours and 7 minutes. He wrecked 13 buildings and attempted to blow up a propane storage tank field. Some folks say he deliberately avoided hurting people, but that seems unlikely because, as it turns out, building parts are heavy, and if they fall on you, having been dislodged by a killdozer, you'll probably die. The only reason he didn't kill anyone was because the police initiated a reverse 911 call and ordered the entire town to evacuate. Marvin destroyed the town hall, the newspaper, some businesses on Main Street, the electric company's main office, and of course the concrete batch plant. His bulldozer was able to fend off 2 scrapers sent to try and stop it. He fired on state troopers and at one of the Dochefs who was attempting to stop him with his own heavy equipment. He also tried to do some of his friends favors during the rampage. One restaurant owner he knew had complained years ago that business had dropped off when the city installed street trees on Main Street because, small business owners, especially retail or restaurant owners, are universally insane and assign cause and effect to any stupid thing. So Marvin, a fellow insane small business owner, killdozed the trees for him. Pretty much the only location on his list he didn't manage to fully killdoze was the Catholic Church. Unrelated, Chucky R. Law. I guess God wasn't really on his side. So when Heemeyer got to killdozing the Gamble's department store on Main Street, he got stuck in a half basement towards the rear of the building. With his killdozer already overheating, he realized his mission had ended, and he shot himself with a handgun he brought with him. With the killdozer disabled and now shut down, explosive experts were attempted to break into the killdozer with C4, to no effect. Eventually, through excruciating manual labor, the police managed to cut through the armor of the killdozer to find Marvin's dead body, and also to find that there was a hatch all along and they didn't need to cut through the armor. So, almost immediately, Marvin was regaled as a hero. In fact, calls went into the local news station saying how Marvin was a great guy while the disaster was occurring, and in fact, while Marvin was demolishing that same local news station. Op-eds and letters to the editor flooded into Granby's local newspaper. Most people felt an immediate kinship with him, having been actually or perceivedly screwed over by local governments. Even within the town itself, sympathy for Marvin Heemeyer and his killdozer grew. Some residents even proposed starting a Dozer Day festival every year. But at the end of the day, though, we gotta remember, this guy went on a rampage essentially because the town wouldn't let him dump poop in a creek. He was never poor. His business was successful even with the huge burden of the construction of a shed across the street. He made out like a bandit when he sold it for 10 times what he bought it for. He saw everyone around him as ripping him off, when in fact they were bending over backward to accommodate him. He had plenty of chances to rectify his sewage situation, even for free. So, Some cop in some TV show said something like, if you meet an asshole one day, you met an asshole, but if you meet a dozen assholes every day, then you're the asshole. Marvin Heemeyer was an asshole. And like an asshole, he eventually pooped all over everyone, in more ways than one. So, what can we learn from this story? I got 2 lessons here. Number 1, almost all small business owners are insane. Number 2, don't shit where you eat, or where you work, or in someone's creek, or in an illegal sewage tank. In fact, just don't shit anywhere other than a toilet with an inspected and approved septic or sewerage system. Plenty of laws are unjust, but those regarding proper and sanitary disposal of sewage are not among them. Okay, that was the bonus episode. So here's the commercial. I'll keep it short because I assume most of you are patrons. But if you manage to pirate the episode, consider going to my Patreon and giving me $1. If your time is worth $15 an hour, that's only 4 minutes of your time. So if you spend more than 4 minutes looking for the video to pirate it, you're getting ripped off and you should just give me the $1. Alright, now I'm going to do the credits. I'm going to make a post about this once I upload the video. Since there are a lot of you now, I might have to do a new reward tier for being in the credits, since I don't want to add a bunch of runtime to the videos because there are 700 or so of you all now. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. See you in the next one.